thank you so much for coming on the show. It's great to finally meet you because this is how we meet each other nowadays, through Zoom. So why don't you
That's true.
tell us a little bit about yourself and your organization and what you're passionate about?
So my name is Christian Lazopoulos. Forget about the last name. I know I'm sure you have similar problems with the last names.
Hey, you know what? It's really funny because it's kind of like it's basically pronounced the same way you spell it. So, I mean, if the people would just read it and pronounce it the way you spell it.
I'm always surprised. It's easier for them to make harder last names than the actual last name for me.
Exactly, right?
How is Lazopoulos easier than Lazopoulos? Things like that.
Yeah, they always add extra
been
syllables.
Exposed to that. Exactly.
All the time.
So my name is Christian Lazopoulos. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer at the Newton's Laboratory, which is an advertising and marketing agency based in Athens in Greece.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say it. I've been working for 23 years in marketing. I started from specialized research, consumer research. That's my original background. And then I went to the dark side of advertising. And for the last...
Got your Darth Vader outfit and your red lightsaber.
Yeah, well, I need to wear black nowadays. It looks slimmer. That's the only way I can manage.
That's why I'm doing it.
So, for the last 12 years, I've also added innovation to my sort of skill set by running innovation labs, being lucky enough to be part more or less in various degrees, meaning to startups, help major international clients, add that dimension or implement a bit more the original value they have potentially in their positioning of the I word, which is a very tough thing to do.
I should call it the I word because a lot of times that's exactly what it is. It's the I word. Oh, you're just using this. What does it really mean, right?
It's like it's the longest spelled four-letter word in marketing. I think that's my experience so far. And from my experience, it's not that people don't understand what it means, it's that they don't understand what it can really add and how to go about it. So,
right.
We're great in theory, especially Greeks are great in theory. It's the practice and the practical aspects.
Well, we invented theory, right? So that's why we're great at it.
We invented everything. Don't ask the Egyptians. All these guys.
Hello, you still there?
Am I still where?
I thought we lost I lost your internet connection for a second there. That's okay. Are you still there?
Hello?
Hello? I can hear you now.
I never lost sight of you or my other connection. Is it better now? My end?
Yeah, it's a little bit better. It's all right. Hey, this is what we have to deal with day in, day out, right?
Definitely.
So
I am always surprised when I meet the real people.
What kind of startups do you typically work with?
Last few years, 80% of them are around FinTech. I think it has a lot to do with the crisis and it wasn't a natural progression, but it seems like it in terms of the crisis element of the pandemic as well. Obviously, because already a lot of people and young people, because startups, I hate to say it, is a younger mindsets game. I don't want to say younger people's game because it's more about mindsets rather than age. But usually these two things connect. But after the financial crisis, there was a huge shift to all kinds of startups regarding fintech in general. And because of COVID, that didn't stop it. It actually accelerated it because a lot of older generations had to sort of get into by force more or less by necessity to get into, electronic transactions and being able to choice lockdowns, etc. So the last 2 years, I would rough estimate of 8% is regarding fintech. Beyond that, the rest of it, or overlapping with fintech, has been around ESG, especially the E and the S.
Mm-hmm.
The G is a bit more specialized. I actually had a couple of startups that are around governance, but they're so, I think it's a bit cheating to call them startups because they were so niche and targeted that immediately they were bought and
wow.
Because
that's like a dream for startup owners. It's like,
it is, and that's one of the things.
Right
and that's one of the immediate, advice I can give to anyone who comes to me and say, I'd like to, do something. I'd like to create my own business. What do you recommend? I'd say, not a lot of people will do it. Just find a problematic public sector element. Go through all the bureaucracy and bibliography, that's where people stop. And because it's a pain. I'm not, it's a very,
it's hard work,
very, definitely. And I'm sure you'll find at least 10 immediate things that would make things easier and faster and cost effective. And if you look at it, and again, I'm not sure if there's official list about these things. That's actually another good idea, I think, to start segmenting startups globally. I'm sure that anything that has to do with G out of the ESG has a much more tremendous success rate because it's an easy win usually.
Yeah.
Whereas
it's a huge pain point.
Everything else, exactly. It's easier to measure because once you go to, even the most quote unquote bureaucratic backward, problematic, call it what you like, public sector, and you say, I can take this and make it X times faster or X times cheaper or X times whatever. The formula is simple enough for them to go, oh, okay, that actually makes sense. No one else has offered it. Definitely, I'm not going to develop it because I'm in that problematic state of affairs and in that, within that big system that stops and inhibits innovation. So yeah, bring it on. As long as you don't want to necessarily make billions, right? Because that's the other thing. But you can make millions, which is not bad.
Well, it starts you off on your trajectory, right? Because you got to start somewhere. I mean, a lot of times people want to start up here, but it's like if you start here, at least you get known. People will say, "Oh, he's already had one successful startup under his belt." It's easier to do more.
That's another thing, which I think applies beyond startups. I think it's life in general, and you can apply to personal success as well as a career on a career level. People that want to start immediately here usually never go anywhere. There's always exceptions, obviously, but I think the chances are near playing the lottery. And obviously you have to also be good. You also have to have that drive and ambition, but then the planets have to align, or even more than the planet. But if you find a path that it's easier to reach and have one win on your resume, so to speak, and not on your belt, I mean, it's a lot easier than to get the second or the third. Because people always ask you, when have you done this before? Even when you start out, which is completely unfair, right? Even people that just got out of university, what is your experience? I just got out.
I got some school projects,
Yeah, well, that's what they quote because that's what they have.
Yeah.
And then people say, oh, he quoted me his, second award in the physics, high school competition. Well, you asked him what sort of experience they had. Well, unless they lie, which is another big thing.
That's bad too. But it sounds like what you're saying is that that's a really primo space for startups to go into, is the G space of the ESG, because
from my experience, yes, it is. Because first of all, the other thing about it is if you're a bit more savvy, and this is not necessarily means that it doesn't have to be your first startup. It can be your first startup, but it doesn't have to be your first foray when it comes to IP and how licensing and regions and things like that.
Yeah.
Imagine if I find a problem, for example, and I find a great solution for the public sector in Los Angeles. Completely random example.
Right.
Chances are I'm going to find more public sectors equivalent problems in the equivalent, public transportation sector in not just other U.S. states, but across the world.
Yeah.
So
every
even
city,
if I get
every city's
this,
got very similar issues.
exactly,
right?
And I learned that from the smart cities projects I've been involved. I've been involved through various big or smaller smart city projects. Some of them huge with Deutsche Telekom, like $1 billion sort of projects, and across 7 different cultures, 7 different regions, the problems or the benefits, that you wanted to end up to were 90% the same. Because when it comes to convenience, when it comes to smooth, seamless operations, and like that, when it comes to running things, there's not a lot of difference when it comes to what you want to achieve and what are the benefits you can give to to a mass number of people.
Yeah.
The more you get personal, the more it changes. But here we're talking about D.
Yeah, exactly. And if you think about it, I mean, I've worked with the city of Palo Alto, and everyone thinks, oh, Palo Alto, that's a rich city. They have a lot of money. And it's like, I don't think any city has a lot of money. They're all strapped. They all have strapped budgets, no matter how rich they look like from the outside. Internally, the governance is still very, very tight. Very tight budgets.
Or poor, and that one leads to another, and it's a vicious circle because, exactly. Even if they have a lot of money, comparatively speaking, to someone else, it's never enough for their own needs. Because the minute they got that budget, it means that there was a need for that huge budget. So even if if you sell your startup or you manage to find success with it in one place of the world, one part of the world, as long as you don't completely, give everything to that first, let's call them clients, and you retain the rights to go elsewhere, you might just need one startup for the rest of your life in that sense. In the G sector, whereas not that it doesn't apply necessarily to the E and the S, it's that the nature of the E and the S being what they are, there's a lot more effort and brain power constantly being applied to in finding what's the next best thing or new thing.
Isn't it also kind of fuzzy measurement wise? Like you can't look at the ROI. The ROI is a little fuzzier.
That's another big discussion. In most places, still it is. In some places, we've gone quite a long way compared to even 3 years ago, I think. But for example, the environmental aspect of things, there are some major staple KPIs like carbon offset, right? Your carbon footprint. You can measure that. The question now, as we go further, is it, however, a very good KPI or not? Because it's not. The way that, because I think that because we've been, for example, focusing on that one KPI for so long, this whole ecosystem, this whole stock market-like system of buying units to offset your footprint, I don't think it has the effect that we'd like to in the long run or even the mid run. So if I'm a polluting company and I just buy my carbon units from someone who manages to plant more trees in the Amazon or the Central Americas or whatever, I'm still polluting the planet. And it's even if it's being offset, which is a huge conversation, because that's the thing we haven't measured yet on a global scale. We don't have yet the models. We don't have yet, I think, the all the factors. It's not about computing power. It's understanding how everything is connected. It doesn't promote the mindset change that we need to have and strive towards. Because it's an easy way out. Because if I make
exactly
a lot of money,
right. I was just about to say that. It's like this is how I get out of it. I can still pollute. I can do whatever I want, but it makes me feel a little bit better that. But are you really? Is it really hitting the results we want? Sounds like
exactly,
no.
And it's the same. No, I don't think so, because it doesn't change culture. When I say culture, I mean from the organizational aspect to, and culture, like anything, if it doesn't change in a smaller scale, it will never start affecting the larger scale. And if you're a big company, that means you employ 500 people plus. Those 500 people are affected by the way you're doing business. And I don't think a lot of business owners or leadership teams, or whatever the structure is, really understand the social responsibility they have on that dimension. There's a lot of social responsibility when you're a big company, but if you're doing a business in a certain way, people, I think, again, in greater or smaller degrees, are being affected because it sends a signal. This is okay. So if it's okay to take the easy way out, the convenient way out, why wouldn't that affect me as a unit?
Right.
And that
Well, it's
affects
just
my
like
family.
I always say we're always going after the low-hanging fruit, right? We go after the low-hanging fruit, we solve the quick problem, but there's still so much bigger problems up there that we're not even touching. We're just trying to solve our conscience with the offsets, but we're not really doing anything.
Exactly. And that's a great example, because low-hanging fruit actually has been the cause of whole ecosystems dying, because they never thought of what to do when there's no more low-hanging fruit and you haven't found a way to reach the higher hanging fruit.
Exactly.
And all your efforts were just picking up what was there. So eventually only giraffes survived.
We all have to have longer necks.
Well, I mean, I think the more I grow old, the more I think everything is connected in how can things affect the way we live, and of course even biology. And perfect example, the smartphone. It's only been around in its current state for very few years, and it already has affected biology in humans in less than a generation.
Yeah.
Which is, when it comes to anthropology sort of standards, it's a microsecond all of a sudden, whereas it used to take hundreds of generations for any real biological change, measurable biological change to happen. It just now happens in a decade to 15 years, because we keep doing this.
Yeah.
Our necks have gone different. Our medulla
thumbs are getting
oblongata
larger. Our thumbs are getting larger.
And you go, well, if that's not evidence of how things can affect, even at a biological level, how we go about things, what else? I mean, the proof is over. It's whether you want to see it and do something about it or not.
Yeah. Well, I often wonder, if Steve Jobs were still around, would he look back on what he created and go, "Oh my God, what have I done?" Or he would just be, "This is great."
Because I think he would find more ways to market it. My personal.
Well, we already have, these things are like drugs, right? I mean, they're electronic drugs, because they just redesign that, unlike a regular drug where you take it and it stays the same consistency, this chemical consistency. These things, they change their chemical consistency as you use them to make them more and more and more addictive. It's
basically,
like, it's
awful.
it's
the same as a drug. You just even with any sort of addictive substance, you need more and more of it, because you get tolerant.
That's right.
Higher tolerance. Yeah. Here, you don't even control the dose. You're not even aware of it. It's self evolving, and it's self-medication, so to speak, without you having a complete control. So it is what it is. And I have an inkling of optimism, though, because I have a 12-year-old. She seems to be more naturally sort of wary of some things that others that didn't grow up with it and just found it along the way. That's
good.
I think, which is, again, it's a pattern that we grew up with. I grew up without a computer, obviously, and then without internet, and then all these things happen. And the more you progress, the more native you are to technology. I think you have more defenses and you're more aware of things because you grew up with it.
Yeah.
So it never had necessarily that, wow, this is great, because I'm like most of people, I think, with innovation and technology, I'm a Trekkie, for example. This was not even imagined in the original series.
That's right.
If you see, I'm not even talking about the original series, even the next generation, which is now, I don't know, 30 years old.
Well, they did have pads.
They had tablets, but if you see them compared to what we have, they look like they're prehistoric. And supposedly they're 1,000, years in the future, or half a millennium. So, we've outgrown the imagination and creativity of only 3 generations back.
Yeah.
That's it's amazing, because when you were a kid, you always wanted a ray gun or something to talk to your combat or anything like that.
Yeah.
We've done all that, and only a month ago I saw an actual lightsaber being
nice
used. Yeah, no, and that's like the fun. I wouldn't want this to become a mass thing. With a lot of silliness out there, and less limbs eventually going to.
We don't want that.
No, but even a lightsaber is now theoretically possible to build.
Yeah.
So
what I love about science fiction is that it even if you can't build the thing now, it puts a spark in somebody's head, going at some point in the future when they see it, they go, "Oh, that's interesting. I wonder if I could build that now." Right? I mean, I'm waiting for the transporter and the replicator so that I can.
If only
make lunch.
If only we've started now. I mean, quantum entanglement is being used for computers that are going to be mass in 5 years' time, 3 years' time.
Yeah.
So everything's going to be. I call it science inspiration, not science fiction anymore, because. And I actually use a lot of clips in my some workshops we do with clients, just to prove the point. Like it's not that hard. People have been thinking about these things forever. And I mentioned Star Trek. I mean, earlier sci-fi, like 19th century sci-fi, the principles are there.
Mm-hmm.
Jules Verne, even afterwards Isaac Asimov, or afterwards Arthur Clarke. I mean, the principle. Arthur Clarke is a famous example. We took literally 10 things he imagined, and we made them because he imagined them, like satellite navigation system and things like that.
Yeah.
He imagined it, and someone went, "Well, actually, that's not a bad idea." So I think it's science. I mean, science fiction, science inspiration is because if you can imagine it, then that should be the motto of innovation. If you can imagine it, it might happen. You might be able to build it.
Yeah. Well, I always say everything is possible. The only question is when. We just don't know when it's going to happen. It will happen at some point, most of the time, unless it's physically impossible, I guess. But even that stuff like that with quantum physics and things like that. Yeah, exactly. Time travel, we've been able to figure that out. We've already see particles going, traversing in backwards in time. So there's like so much more out there that we don't know. We've only got a tip of the iceberg of what's happening in the world.
Exactly.
It's crazy.
And that's, I think, one of the challenges in innovation. So we have all these great things that we've been discussing that's so inspirational and gets the creative juices flowing and everything. And then you have to apply it in, how do I make someone buy more shoes? Or
I know, it's this is so cool and amazing, but you have to reel it back to
which is not a bad thing. It's some a lot of people don't have the capacity to find the same inspiration when they apply it for marketing purposes. Right. And it's a shame, because I've always, since I was a kid, I loved ads more so than the actual TV schedule program itself. Mm-hmm. Because first of all, I thought there were much more nifty storytelling bits than the actual longer forms, and I love that, because someone when I was all younger, the ads were longer. Obviously, within a minute, you could tell a whole story where you took a couple of episodes otherwise in a normal TV series or something like that. But I always and therefore from a young comparatively age, I had this realization early on in my first degree, where I said, I mean, it's not the news or just the governments or just the authorities that apply and exert all these influences to how we perceive the world or our everyday lives. It's mostly brands, really, if you think about it. Because they are the ones that have the most. We didn't call it content, back then, but it was the ones that actually had the most content around you. If you think about it.
Yeah.
So, when there were periods of great for the economy, jobs abound, money flowing, etc., you saw that in the actual marketing cloud, if I can, borrow or steal that word. And when things were going bad, people actually first reacted to the bad news and to what was coming, not because it was on CNN or Fox News or, BBC worldwide. When the yellow stickers happened in the supermarket, when all of a sudden everything was 1+1 or 50% off, or we has to go, and that's where people said, "Oh, okay, it is happening," because it was less theoretical. Because when you watch televised news for all these decades, you get insensitive a bit to it as well. It's just, it's a 2D
I don't believe
thing.
anything. I don't believe anything in the news anymore.
or it's in the background. It's like a movie. It's saying, I see it, I understand it, I don't feel it. When I go actually to shop, to actually transact and give my hard-earned money, or my limited budget to whatever, and I see that even big brands, because brands, the big ones, are usually, in our perception, bigger than I am as a powerful entity. Even if they have to compromise, or they start giving out those signals of it's happening, that's when you get to feel it yourself. So in that sense, we should still be inspired when we try and all this great inspiration and great creativity, and to apply it on marketing. Most people lose their fizz, that spark.
Yeah.
And that's one of the biggest disappointments for me, especially during sessions, creativity sessions, innovation labs, things like that. Is trying to keep that same level of excitement throughout the whole process, even when it comes down to the which are the 3 directions we're going to qualify for going forward for MVPs, for example.
Yeah. It's always seems to be boring when you reel it back to the present. It's like, what do we need to do next? It's like, oh, that's it. The creativity just fizzles out of the room.
Or you leave it at the transportation, teletransportation level, which is then it's very hard to make the connection to, even if it's Nike, like a big open to innovation, I'll try, stuff brand. But then you go, but maybe we can make it feel like it's teleportation to the end user.
Yeah,
exactly. But there's always that gap. And again, it's all about the culture of the brand as well. So, as I mentioned, Nike, I've worked a bit with Nike. They're much easier to keep that excitement with, because they've created a culture for years now. Everything is possible, or don't be afraid to try things like that.
Yeah.
Whereas other brands, even in the same category, right? It's not, because some categories are even less prone, obviously, to taking chances. I mentioned fintech. I work a lot with banks lately.
Oh yeah, good luck innovating in the fintech space. Actually, bank space maybe not, but fintechs they can innovate, right? Fintechs typically innovate more.
They yes and well, the short answer is yes, which always been another humbug for me, in the sense of I don't know, for the last 15 years I've always had big banks as clients. And they always had, always the CEO, the CMO, or a C filling the rest of the 2 letters. They were like, all these sleepless nights waiting for the one application, the one startup that's gonna, terminate us or make us obsolete. And I say, listen, guys, there might be 3,000 startups per month, globally speaking, within the category, but these are 1 to 2 to 3 people. Startups that have to find money, they have to find people to believe in them. You have the money, you have the people, you can have the best of the best, or employ the best of the best, and you're just waiting to become obsolete rather than actually do something about it.
Exactly.
And that's,
then they had the resources to do it, so
and then eventually, it will catch up to them if they don't start actually utilizing the huge power advantage they still have.
Yeah.
because I mean, even to this day, even in 2023, banks still have all the advantages if they want to really innovate versus any startup. I don't
Absolutely.
care how well funded it is, because they're banks. I'm not talking about a credit, small credit bank in the middle of, I don't know, Mississippi or something. I'm talking about the big ones.
Oh yeah.
And it's easy to separate. And I understand all the legacy issues, not just technological but cultural, et cetera, et cetera. But it's easy to get that away with it. You just create an autonomous unit and separate it as far away as possible from the bank itself.
Yeah.
And you just use all the good stuff of the bank for those purposes.
That's right.
No. But
again, they ask the same question. What's the ROI? How quickly can we do this? If it's not $1 billion business, I'm not interested. It's like, come on.
You know what, Chris? I'm not going to name names. I'm just going to give you. So a year and a half ago, or more now, maybe 20 months ago, even, I think 19, 20 months ago. I won't say again, we've came up, it wasn't even a startup, it was an innovation project for against scams and phishing, right? So we created a system and we found even 3 different agencies that could implement the project just to showcase to them how much and how long it would take. So this system was a win-win-win. Why? Because it automated a huge section of 24/7 people on the phone in case you got scammed or you realized you had an issue. It made things a lot easier in communicating, in not communicating only, but in preventing a behavior that would leave you susceptible to being scammed. And it was a world first. We've tracked it. We haven't found anywhere that solution. Now the average development time needed, because we instead of just the 3 agencies, we also came up with 3 different ways just to foresee any legacy issues when it came to the technology of the bank. Was 10 days development time.
Wow.
And the average cost was about $30,000 plus or minus, depending.
That is a no-brainer.
They made the ROI. They actually immediately came up with saying this is millions, immediately saving just the cost aspect, right?
Yeah.
Because you can't really predict how many people would, you would help a lot of people, but that was harder to predict. But in being able to reallocate resources to normal call centers and not just for that, immediately it saved them millions. It's still being developed 20 months now.
You're kidding.
Because of because of pipeline.
Wow.
So yeah.
Couldn't they have moved it up a little bit?
And you know what? The problem is you can't find. It's definitely not the CMO. It's definitely not the CTO. They're the ones that were excited, immediately understood the value of it. Even not just with that. That's like an extreme example. It's one of the few extreme examples in my 20 plus years career. It's just it's easier to say, okay, I'll take a year or more to implement this rather than change the whole system as it needs to become in order to be able to do it faster.
Right.
And it's the day-to-day that kills it is. But and I completely understand it, because I've never been from the client side, but I've been around so many years within their organizations and actually had offices in my client. I actually spend more time in their offices than in mine at certain point. I understand the day-to-day is a killer. And that's why I think the best way is to create completely autonomous innovation units that would get all the great benefits of any organization that wants to innovate, not just banks, but anyone that wants to truly innovate. created by cherry picking people from within the organization. Otherwise, it'll be completely irrelevant.
Yeah.
Right. We won't understand the business itself, and give them at least 3 years
Mm-hmm.
to find their, to find their bearings to create the team, because you won't have an immediately ready team, no matter how talented the people are, et cetera, in order to immediately produce things that will really make a difference to the original investment business now, because they should see this as an investment,
yeah,
and not just another business unit.
Yeah, it's not just
a very
cost
hard
center.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
it's a very hard thing to
especially
sell.
in banks. I mean, even they're probably the most risk averse when it comes to stuff like that, right?
Yes, but they are. It's just a shift of perception, because I found, for example, years ago, the Lloyds Banking Group, huge bank in the UK. Once you make them understand the investment, the number behind the investment, it was like, oh, it's not bad. Because so they have that advantage, because innovation doesn't have to be expensive. We're not talking about, in most cases, it doesn't have to be expensive. Now, there are some categories that are very exotic, and the implementation itself, it's really expensive, but these are beyond the realm of our discussion. They're really high hanging fruit, like, new material development, things like that. Yes, they have laboratories, they have physics and specific ways of building things, and you have to be underground because of leakage things. I mean, we're not talking about that, obviously.
Yeah,
and that's why usually these innovations really come from governmental budgets, whether it's DARPA or whether it's CERN, or whether we're talking about really high end applied innovation here, or theoretical innovation before it becomes applied. But most of the time, innovation is the process of coming up with ideas shouldn't be expensive. It's the cost of people, really, and some nice surroundings where you can induce creativity, or at least not hinder it.
Yeah.
So for a bank, because banks, as Dillinger famously said, that's where the money is, it's not as big a deal as for a retailer.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But again, if we're talking about big brands, again, it shouldn't be a no-no. But it's you have to find the right people to change their mindset.
Yeah.
And usually you can find within their own organization the best arguments for investing in innovation, saying, here is the cost of your, here's your annual cost of how much you spend on printers and paper. And this is what you need for an innovation department. Usually the bigger the organization, it dwarfs or should dwarf or be equivalent. So you give them an idea of, I actually had that conversation years ago with Unilever in the UK, and I said, you know how much you spend on toilet paper in your offices? That was pre-COVID, obviously. Huge amount, because huge spaces in offices. But then you go, so actually having an innovation center specialized in this, because it was a more specialized conversation. You see, it's not that big deal.
Yeah. It's all a question of comparison. Perspective, that's right. Well, it's time to think like a futurist. It's the year 2033, 10 years out. Do you think things are going to get better or worse, or where will we be in 2033?
No, that's a toughie. I don't know, because I'm very aware as I grow older that I become grumpier and grumpier.
Join the club.
It's like our dads famously said, you'll understand when you reach my age. I understand more and more what they were on about. And joking aside, for the last 5 years, I think we're going backwards in many things as a society, unfortunately. Whether it's human rights, war. I mean, there's a war going on in Europe, in the middle of Europe, for a year plus now.
I know, it's
And
insane, isn't it?
And we're not even talking about it anymore.
Mm.
What does that say about us? Honestly, if I draw the comparison with World War One and World War Two, supposedly ending all wars. The level of voluntarism throughout the countries, you don't get that anymore.
No.
And it is, for me, this is the side of me feeling that probably I'm not very optimistic about 10 years from now, about things 10 years from now. On the other hand, the only thing I think that can really make a change and save us, whatever saving means for the species, going even more forward in the future, or even only 10 years, it probably will be technology and innovation. Meaning what? If we do actually find a source of energy, for example, it's going to be cheap or free for everyone, then most reasons for war are over.
Yeah.
Or at least energy wars, everybody knows that if we don't do anything about water, fresh water, we're going to have water wars later down the line, or huge displacement of population that would affect everyone. I mean, we know all these things.
Yeah.
And at least the last 10 years, because of the culture of innovation and the startup culture that's going on, a lot of that, especially in the last, as I mentioned earlier, I would say 4 years, is going towards ESG more and more and more, actually trying to tackle these things. This is the sort of counterbalance to my natural grumpiness and my pessimism. I hope this is not a really way of saying I don't know to you at the moment, but
it's okay. That's perfectly fine.
No, because I have a 12-year-old and she's going to be, 22 in 10 years' time.
Yeah.
I'd like, when I see her and how she thinks and how she operates, and I'd like to say things should be better because her generation is going to enter the active, sort of productive mode, and the people that are now 25 are going to be 35, and they're going to be part of the more of the ruling part aspect and productive aspect of societies, and hopefully they're better people than us on average. So I think things would be incrementally better. I think in 10 years' time, as long as we don't do anything significantly bad, because things have been, as I said, we're going backwards incrementally for the last decade or so. So hopefully we will not accelerate that, that aspect of it. So I think it's going to be better because even, there are actual, objective studies saying that every year we've been better off as a species than the last one with various KPIs. Now it's not even.
You just have to ignore the news because the news makes it sound like everything's worse. But if you look at the underlying statistics, things are better.
Yes,
in general.
Definitely. What changes is it's probably the imbalances of things. There are some parts of the world where it's really not as good as it should be.
Yeah.
And as I said, hopefully there are hiccups. Whereas some things that I grew up thinking that are, universally right and universal rights, meaning the whole thing with the abortion as a right, being this whole thing in the States, and I say the States really affect the world in many cases, right? I would never, if you asked me 10 years ago whether that would be a discussion that would be reopened, I would say no way. It took us all this time to eventually come to that.
Yeah.
And no way. But never say never is another thing as I grow old.
Well, it's like everything's going to happen. The only question is when. But the problem is that you never know what's going to come back, right? Cultural change. And I think it's a pendulum, right? So we're swinging one way, and then we're going to hopefully swing back in the other direction, where things are going to start getting better, and hopefully we continue swinging towards the good stuff. At least that's my hope.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, I usually say it's circles. It's the same thing as a pendulum, more or less.
Yeah.
It's just, I think the older you get, that's why you're grabbier. You've lived through more of these circles.
That's right. The same thing happening over and over again with a new name.
Yeah, you get more nauseous because of the circles.
Well, you heard the latest thing. I'm like, so you remember back when we were younger, and sometimes you had to hold down multiple jobs in order to make ends meet. Well, now there's a word for it: polyworking.
Yeah, polyworking. Yeah, we had polyamorous, now we have polyworking. Eventually, someone's getting screwed with it. That's
exactly.
You think about it differently.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, change is natural, because I keep hearing a lot of people, and myself included, when the hardest thing they say is recruiting people, right?
Yeah.
Everyone around my age that are in a position to hire people, and we have discussions, there's no drive, there's no ambition, there's no, and then you go, all right, so what is objectively better, working to live or live to work? I mean, if we oversimplify things. I grew up in a household where your job and how successful you were at it was a huge part of your identity.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, it's a drive, but equally it can be a burden, right? I mean,
absolutely.
When is enough? When is it enough? Well, is it money? Is it titles? When is it enough? And supposedly, even if you ask someone who has a great strive and ambition and drive, etc., is because they want to create a better life for themselves or for the family.
Mm.
But the thing is, are you able to get out of this whole race to actually enjoy where you are at any given point, etc.? Right. Is it so bad that maybe young people want to have this as a given?
No, I think it's a great thing. I think we're readjusting, we're reformulating, because I think what's happened with productivity is that we use technology to be more productive, but we're still 40-hour work weeks and all that stuff. Maybe we don't need to work 40 hours anymore. Maybe we don't need to work 20 hours anymore, because the job gets done. Right.
That's a great example, because I keep saying, and we keep saying as an agency, because I think marketing agencies, advertising agencies were ahead of the curve when it came to things like that. I don't care how long you stay in the office for, as long as you do what you're supposed to do. Leave after an hour if you do everything you need to. But the thing is, I've never left before 12 hours or 10-hour days, because there's always something else to do.
Exactly. There's always more.
I expect that from my team members. Go. Yeah. It's done. Go. Relax.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be great to apply it to ourselves as well, I think.
Yeah, maybe someday, right?
Yeah, but in the old days, the more responsibility you had, or the higher up you were, you worked less.
Yeah.
At some point, this shifted. I don't know when it happened, but I'd like to find that pinpoint. Go back, travel in time.
Now we work more than anything.
So as I keep saying to everyone, make sure you find something you love doing.
Yeah.
Because then you're going to even if you make mistakes in terms of how long you work, etc., at least you're going to enjoy it still.
Exactly.
And not get burdened with.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is great. Thank you so much. This has been fantastic. So if somebody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
Hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm traditional like that. LinkedIn is the traditional way now, I suppose. Or just my email, or through the newtons.gr.
Okay, so where I can't find you on TikTok then? Not yet.
I'm unfortunately I do it with a mask and with a pseudonym, because I don't want everyone else to get jealous of my dance moves.
That's right.
I used to be on TikTok up until I read the EULA's things and the what you signed away. Said I agree, and I made everyone in the household delete the application. It's
Good for
scary,
you.
man. It
Oh
is
yeah,
scary.
yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so
Scary.
much. This has been great.
Thanks,
I'll put
Chris.
your
It was
contact
a pleasure.
information in the show notes. So,
Thank you.
ευχαριστώ πολύ.
Παρακαλώ. See, I didn't ask you. So you have Greek heritage, I imagine? I didn't ask that. You
Sorry?
have Greek heritage, right?
Greek.
You're a Greek heritage. You have a Greek
Oh yeah,
descendant,
yeah.
or-
My parents were born ο πατέρας είναι από την Άνδρο και η
Άνδρο,
μητέρα από το Marousi. So
This
I'm
is where I
originally.
live. Marousi. Yeah.
Oh no way.
Yeah, this is where I live. Marousi. Yeah.
We have
Cool.
so they moved to Canada and met in Canada, and I spent the first 35 years of my life in Canada, and now I live in Silicon Valley. But we
That's
still
why
have
you're
a
a
place.
nice guy. That's why you're so nice.
Γιατί είμαι Καναδέζος, is that why?
Yeah, Canada
Okay.
brings the best out of any culture, I think.
Yeah, I hope so. Anyway, so thanks so much.
Thanks, Chris.
Talk to you guys.
Παρακαλώ.
Talk to you later.
Bye. Bye.